Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to episode 8 of my Pro Tools 11 video tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to wrap up the last of our main edit tools in Pro Tools. In the previous 3 episodes, we've already talked about the trim, the selector, the grabber, the smart tool, the zoom tool, the scrubber tool, but we have not yet talked about the pencil tool. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to talk about the pencil tool and how you can use it to draw automation and all of its secondary functions as well. One thing that we won't be going over with the pencil tool is how to use it to, say, draw in MIDI notes and work in the MIDI editor. That we'll cover another day. So today we're basically just going to talk about using the pencil tool and its secondary shapes to draw in volume, mute, and pan automation to create some cool creative things. So the most basic function of the pencil tool is that you can use it in freehand or line mode to draw in volume automation. So let's say that I wanted my strings here to sort of fade in. I could change from waveform view to volume view, and I could either use the freehand mode to sort of manually draw in a shape, or I could use the line tool to sort of get something that's a bit more refined and more, there we go, a little more straight there. So I could maybe fade in the strings. Now notice that nothing happens there. If you find that your automation isn't being read, you have to make sure that you go over to your track, and here it says off. Make sure the automation mode is set to read, so it actually reads the automation on the track. Except I need to unmute the track. And it fades in. And also, if you hit Command =, your mixer will also follow this as well. So there you go. So that might be one thing you might want to do with the pencil tool. It's one of the most basic things you can do with it. By the way, if you want to delete automation with the pencil tool, if you hold Option, the pencil just sort of flips around and you can erase your automation points. And you can also use the selector tool to drag over any automation that you don't want, and you can hit delete to delete it. So I'm going to set my strings back to off. And what I really want to do is I want to add a second strings track, sort of like a deep bass strings. And I want to do some creative things with some of these other tools rather than just the freehand and line tool. Let me create a new stereo instrument track. And I'm going to call this bass strings. And I'm going to choose expand. There it is. And the patch I'm going to use is under huge pads, and it's called Octastrings. Let me arm the track and just play a little of that for you. So the part I'm going to play is going to follow the chord progression of the song, which is basically E flat, G flat, A flat, D flat, all in just whole notes. So let me turn my click track on so I can stay in time, and let me just play this in. So there it is. We're not really going to deal much with MIDI editing for a while, but for now I'm going to use the grabber tool to double click on my MIDI clip I just played in. I'm going to hit Command A to select all of the notes. I'm going to go up to Event Operations Quantize, or Option 0. I believe I showed this to you guys in another video. And I'm going to quantize the note on and off to a whole note, which is basically what I played in. So I'm going to hit Apply. So all my notes are right there set to the grid. Just one thing I should mention is that the MIDI editor actually has a copy of all of the edit tools that were in the edit window. It's just that we're not going to get, and they all have actually independent functions, different functions than they do in the edit window. So we're going to get to those eventually, but we're going to wait until we start talking about MIDI to actually get to that. All right, so let me use my selector tool. I'm just going to trim up my clip here. Use the grabber tool, click on my new clip, hit Command D to duplicate it. Let's see what this sounds like. Cool. So I want to do something a little bit more interesting with this. I don't want just whole notes. I want the notes to feel like they're maybe moving a little bit. One quick thing we can do just with the pencil line tool is show the audio volume on the bass strings track here. Let me pull this up to the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my grid to a half note, and I'm going to create these sort of half note swells. So I'm going to start right here. And by the way, I'm drawing in just before the grid line, and I'm drawing just up to the next grid line. So I'm going to click here and pull down just like so. So again, using the line tool. You can do it with the freehand tool as well, but it's not going to be quite as exact. One of the great things about the selector tool in automation is that you can actually drag over automation, hit Command C or Control C in a PC to copy, and then click where you want the next sort of iteration of the automation to go and hit Command V or Control V to paste it in place. So I actually can just go down the line here and draw in this little volume swell, and if I get enough of them, I can copy those and paste those as well. So now I get something like this. So that's kind of cool to be able to go in and just take something as simple as whole notes and make it move and give it some motion. Let me delete that automation. Let's try something else. Let's try the square tool. I'm going to come back to the triangle tool. The square tool, actually the triangle, square, and random tools are cool because they will create a shape at the pace of whatever you've set your grid. So like if I set my grid to an eighth note, and I drag over this with the square or the triangle or the random pencil tool, it'll actually create that shape, a square shape, a triangle shape, whatever it may be, in the rhythm of whatever you had your grid set to. So I can do things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bit of like a ducking effect where the volume alternates between high and low at an eighth note pace. Maybe I want it to go a little faster than that. Let's try a 16th note instead. Or you can try a bit more subtly, you know, instead of doing like a complete on and off like I was doing, you can just do like a subtle ducking effect. The only problem is you get those little clicks in there. Another way to do this, or a similar effect, is instead of affecting volume, you can choose to affect the audio mute, which basically affects the mute button. And so basically this is either on or off. There's nothing in between. You're either fully muted or you're not muted at all. So that one doesn't give you sort of the clicky sound that the square tool is giving us. Another way to do this, to play with the mute function, is to use the random function, the random pencil tool. What this does is it sort of randomizes when it's on and when it's off. It's sort of like the square tool, but just it's completely random. And you can try out some different random rhythms, if you will, and then maybe find the parts that you like and copy and paste them. So maybe I really like the way this one sounds. I can just copy that one automation shape there using the selector tool. Pull the rest of this out. I'm going to put my grid back on a quarter note so I can hone in exactly where I want to go. And I can just copy and paste in that random shape that I generated from the random pencil tool. Okay, so I like the way that sounds, but let's try using something with the triangle tool since we skipped that one. What I actually want to use the triangle tool for is I want to use it to make the pan on our bass line here sort of move back and forth between the two speakers. So the problem with trying to do this with a stereo track is that stereo tracks actually have two balancers, a left and a right pan knob. So it's going to be really difficult to try to make this sort of sweep left and right when you have to do it to two different balancers. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a new mono version of this track and then just drag the MIDI data down onto it. Because with a MIDI a mono track, you're only going to have one balancer. You're going to only have one pan knob, so it's not going to be quite as difficult to do. So let's do Shift Command N. I'm going to use a mono instrument track. We'll just call this bass strings. You won't be able to pull the expand down. It's in red because it's not the correct format, so we're actually going to have to go back and choose the expand again. But this time in mono. And we were using the Huge Pads octa strings. There we go. And I can pull the MIDI clips down and delete our old track. And this time, I'm going to choose audio pan. So notice it's not pan left and pan right. It's just a single balancer that basically sweeps. It's going to sweep the stereo image left and right to create sort of like a panning sweeping effect. So this one line now represents how far left or how far right the signal is. Right now it's dead center. So I'm going to choose the triangle tool, and I'm going to start right in the middle and just drag out. You can make it more, more narrow if you want. I want a really wide, sweeping panning effect. And let's see what this sounds like. Let's see what it sounds like with everything. Now, if we wanted to do this with something maybe a little less gradual sounding, we could go back and try using the square tool for this. Let's set our grid to a 16th note, and let's choose a square. Now we're going to have this really fast-moving panning effect. There you go. Now, at the bottom of our, let me just delete this first. There we go. Let's go back to clips. There we go. At the bottom of the pencil tool, there's two additional pencil secondary modes. There's parabolic and S-curve. Parabolic and S-curve cannot be used out in the main area to draw volume automation or anything like that. Really, what the at least without getting into the MIDI functions of what they can do, parabolic and S-curve are used to draw in shapes for tempo automation. So, and you can actually use all of these for tempo automation, not just the bottom two. It's just that the bottom two will not work when you're trying to draw in like volume automation on a track. It won't work. So what you can do to affect the tempo is click on the little arrow that's just to the left of the tempo ruler. And by the way, if you don't see the tempo ruler, you just click here and just go down and show tempo. And it brings up this little sort of green line that is showing you that we have a static tempo from beginning to end. Now, one thing that we can't really do right now is we can't change the tempo of our audio tracks. You can only really change the tempo of your MIDI tracks unless you're using elastic audio. Now, just for the sake of confusion, where I'm not going to really get really deep into elastic audio yet, I'm just going to tell you that if you want your audio tracks to change and have their tempo change based on what you do up here as far as tempo is concerned, you're going to have to turn on elastic audio. So just for now, I'm going to keep this real simple. On anything that's audio, you click on the little oil can icon, choose polyphonic, and then make sure that the little thing that looks like a watch, you click on that and change it to ticks. That's the time base. And what that's going to do is it's going to make the drum loop and it's going to make the strings actually change based on the tempo change that I make. The MIDI data will always change to the tempo unless you've got the time base set to samples instead of ticks. We'll come back to elastic audio and time bases in a much later video, but for now, that's what you need to do to make sure that the tempo changes. So one thing you can do with the pencil tool is you can draw in tempo changes. So if I use like the line tool here and I want to start really slow and then go to a faster tempo, you can do that. Or maybe I wanted to use the freehand tool instead, just to draw in something weird. You can also use the parabolic and S-curve shapes up here to draw in. With parabolic, you can draw in sort of logarithmic shapes. And you can also use it to draw in sort of exponential shapes. And you can also use the S-curve function to draw in S-shaped changes. There you go. I guess the difference between drawing in an S-curve this way and maybe using the freehand tool is that the S-curve and logarithmic functions will actually sort of smooth out the way you drew it. The freehand tool isn't really going to do that for you. It's just going to keep it as sloppy as you drew it, whereas the S-curve and parabolic functions will actually sort of smooth out the motion that you drew in to make it more parabolic or more S-curve shaped. All right, so those are the pencil tools, all of the pencil modes. We'll come back to these when we start getting more in depth with automation, and when we start talking about MIDI a bit more. There's a few other functions that these serve, but for now, they basically serve to just know that their main function is to control volume changes, pan changes, mute changes, or other automation changes. And again, with the parabolic and S-curve tools, you can use those to affect the session tempo across time. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.